Oh, you probably can't see me.
Yeah, the back is a little backlit. Yeah.
I'm in a hotel room and I just got here. Oh. Okay, hold on, let me see.
Yeah, take your time. We've got time. Julie, Jeff, and Lisa are who we're waiting for. There's Julie. Okay. Let me.
Hold on, let me see if I can draw the curtains.
Yeah, that would probably work.
Is that better? Can you see me better with the light on?
I see you better. You're still a little backlit, but honestly, I mean, I can see that you have a nose and glasses and a mouth. I mean, what else can you hope for in this Zoom world, right? Hi, Julie.
The problem with the curtains is that they're really shiny.
Oh, I see. And they don't actually filter much light out.
Yeah, they're really cheesy.
Can you turn just a little bit so that like the window is coming is kind of on your side?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. That works. Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Jeff, right? Jeff Hoffmann. Okay. Get him in here. We're just waiting for Lisa.
Is that any better? Probably not. Probably not a lot.
I mean, I can totally see your face. Oh, it's like,
okay.
Maybe the light on in the back might not be better, actually.
The light?
That light might be, here, turn it off again. Sorry.
Hi, Carrie.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for being here. I don't know, it's about the same.
Better?
Oh, there you go. That's good. Yeah, that's good.
That's the really best right here.
Where are you?
California.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Where in California?
I'm in sunny downtown Los Angeles.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. I do not live here. I live in gloomy New Jersey.
I today live in gloomy Chicago. So
what's that?
I said today I live in gloomy Chicago, or really gloomy Aurora, but it is very unspring-like here today. So a good night to like snuggle up under a blanket and watch a great author event, I think. I am looking for Lisa in the waiting room, but I don't see her quite yet. Well, I'll start with you guys. I'm Carrie. I work for Anderson's Bookshops. I do their marketing and run these events. So it's really great to meet all of you. And I'm really grateful you guys are here. So thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time tonight.
Thank you.
I'm still looking for Lisa, so I don't have to repeat myself and make you guys sit through this more than once.
Does my mic sound all right?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Audio fine. Oh, good.
Yep. How about you, Julie?
Did you want us not to have earbuds? The only reason I'm using them is because there appears to be a party going on in the room next door.
No, it's totally up to you. Whatever your comfort level is.
It's not very elegant, but
yeah,
it's not very elegant, but it's more elegant than hearing the.
You're going to make this exciting, aren't you, Gabrielle?
I know. Say, we're off to a good start.
I like it.
I'm gonna grab some water. Hold on.
A couple of things I'll tell you guys before Lisa gets here. I am, even though my background looks fantastic, I am sitting in a closet in my house, my master bedroom closet. So if, sometimes my Wi-Fi gets a little spotty up here. So if for some reason I disappear or you notice, or the only way you'd really notice during the event is if one of you ends up taking on hosting duties, like, cause it'll switch it over to you and you might see a little pop up. Just know that that happens all the time. This is being recorded in the cloud. I'll just pop back on as soon as I can. And then if that happens to any of you either, like if one of you drops out, like just get back in as soon as you can. And if all of you were to suddenly go down, like I would just jump in and kill time until you guys come back up. So you name it, I've seen it over the last 2 years.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Oh boy, I was at an author event. It wasn't intentional on my part, but I wound up being in North Dakota on an Indian reservation that didn't have really great reception, and I kept fading in and out. It was a disaster. I felt so bad. It was not good. It's just not good.
We have all been there, I feel like, over the last 2
Yeah.
years, like where you're just like, sorry, I'm doing the best I can with like what the Wi-Fi gods are giving us today, right? So
Yeah.
it happens. I mean, it's just part of this lovely virtual landscape. Do any of you have Lisa's contact information, and maybe you want to text her real quick?
I only have an email,
Okay.
Lisa@lisawingate.com.
Because sometimes she also could be sitting in the waiting room, but like if her kids like use her computer for school or something, it's like the wrong name is there. And I don't know. That's
I'll-
happened a couple of times before.
I'll
too.
email her and just ask if she's in the waiting room.
Okay. Oh, Carol Wiseman. Wow. All right. Well, I'll get started with you guys while we're waiting for her. I know she's done a ton of these with us. So because there's 4 of you tonight. So normally how we handle it, if there's 1 or 2 authors, is I will, come on, let everybody in from the waiting room right when we get to about 7 o'clock, 7:02-ish. And then I do like a short intro, a little bit about Anderson's, how the procedure to pick up books, a little bit of an intro of all of you. And then I kind of skedaddle, although I'm watching the event the whole time, but I will just turn off my camera and unpin myself. Actually, while we're talking, I'll pin all of us so that I don't have to do that once we're live. And then, but because there's 4 of you tonight, I wasn't sure if you guys wanted, there she is.
So there's going to be 5 of us, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yes.
right.
We'll have Susanna Porter.
Oh my gosh.
Porter
And
as
she's
well.
sitting right in there, and I did not let
Oh.
her in early. Oh my goodness. I totally forgot. I was looking at the author list and forgot Susanna Porter. All right. Well, then I'll wait and do that same spiel when they're in here. Hi, Susanna. Sorry about that. I saw you sitting in there and I forgot to click to have you come on in.
You weren't going to let me in.
I know. I was like, oh no, I forgot. I was looking at the author list. I forgot I had a great moderator tonight, which
Oh,
makes
yeah.
my job
That's
very
good.
easy, actually. So yeah, this is kind of a treat for me. I get to just sort of sit back tonight, which is great.
Good. You're usually the moderator.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sometimes I handle the Q&A. I wasn't sure if you wanted to handle the Q&A like through the chat. Is usually how we have people do it.
I think it's easier if you read the chat, because sometimes, it's like hard. I prepared some questions for each of the authors, so we can sort of go through those, and then once it gets to the Q&A, I'll let you handle that.
You want me to pop back on and do? Yeah, sure. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I was just telling them, so normally what I do is I let everybody in from the waiting room, and then I do like a short intro about Anderson's and, how to pick up their books and stuff like that. And then I do a short intro of the authors, but I was thinking because there's 4 authors and a Susanna tonight, that you guys, I wasn't sure if you guys wanted to kind of either do a little intro of yourself, or if Susanna, you might have had a little intro planned.
Yeah, what I thought was that you do your spiel, and then you can introduce me, and then I'll just say that I thought we'd start by saying what all of us on the panel here have some connection with adoption, and so just a brief comment about that, if we did or if we don't, and then I was going to go and then ask each author to describe their book in a few minutes. And then we'll get into questions. That was sort of the plan. Okay.
That is perfect. Let me just copy and paste your little intro over. And then throughout everybody's cameras are off, of course. It helps cut down on Zoom lag. Plus, we learned the hard way that it's better that way because people are weird in their houses and get a little too comfortable. So we're like, we're just going to have them off from now on. So that's why we have people put them through the chat, their questions through the chat, so I can collect them during it and then I'll pop back on at the end. Also in the chat, I will be putting links to all of your guys's books, and so that they can, purchase them. If you guys bring up other books in your conversation that I catch, like sometimes I'll try to throw those in the chat too. Just links for them to be able to order it.
I make a suggestion, Gabrielle, your face is very much in shadow because you have a window behind you. I'm just wondering whether you can.
Unfortunately, I'm in the I'm facing west, and there are really ugly curtains in a hotel room.
Oh,
that are
you're in a hotel
super
room, right?
shiny, and actually the whole room is shiny. To be honest with
It's
you.
okay. It's not
It is a
terrible.
very shiny room.
There's a
Yeah.
metallic vibe here, so sorry.
That's okay.
And
It's all right. It's-
honestly, if I turn that way, then you see the metallic bedspread, so the headboard. So is there
It's-
any?
funny,
I
it comes
suppose I
and
can
goes.
go to the bathroom.
Sometimes you're
Okay.
fine, and then every once in a while
Yeah.
you're in shadow. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Susanna, one comment. My paperback release is next Tuesday. So
Okay.
if you could mention that rather than me shamelessly promoting it, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I wasn't going to mention release dates because I just really didn't know them, but sure, I can.
Or I can work it into.
I think
For
I
other
think
people's children,
Yeah.
yeah, I can put it in the chat too.
Mine-
Like,
Okay.
you know,
yeah,
because it
why don't you do
releases
that?
what, April 5th, I think I have written down here.
Yep.
So I'll let them know they can already order through us.
Sounds good.
Good. Okay,
Thank-
that's good.
All right. Let me just.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi,
Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
good to see everybody too.
Hi, Lisa.
Nice to meet you.
Good to
I
meet
know
everybody.
it's really nice to meet all of you guys. And before Suzanne, oh, you know what? Let me pin you guys. Before you guys popped on, I was just telling them that, you know, obviously, it's been a hard year to be booksellers. It's been a hard 2 years. So we are just eternally grateful that authors are continuing to be willing to do these virtual events, and we are so grateful for it. So thank you all for being here tonight. We really do appreciate it. And hopefully sometime soon you guys can get through Anderson's and see us in person. That would be great.
Where are you located?
Just outside Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Carrie,
so-
I've been there in person.
Who's been here? Julie?
Julie.
Yes.
Yeah, when
I
my
actually
book
think I've
launched
met you
last
before.
spring, I was in the store a bunch of times signing stuff. So it's
Okay.
good to
Yes.
see
You
you
look
again.
very familiar to me. It's very nice to see you again.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't remember if Lisa's been in store with us too.
I believe I have. We either that or we did an offsite event.
Oh, probably. Yes. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm not sure if I worked that one or not. Oh, wow. You guys, you are filling up this waiting room very nicely. I'm
Well,
liking it.
good.
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 That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is a great thing. We just love to see, you know, it's funny right now. We don't know, like are things are starting to go back in person, but some people still like the virtual format. So we kind of have a little bit of both right now. Now there's new variants, so who knows? Like, so
Who
it's
knows?
nice that we have
Yeah.
this option. I see a couple of author names in the waiting room too. All right. Do you guys have any questions for me before I push the button and get started?
Will you tell in terms of time? Should we just let it? I mean, do you want to interrupt us or we're going over or
Yeah.
something like that?
We've found usually like if I jump in about 40 minutes after 45, depending how many questions there are. If there are tons of questions, I might pop in about 35
Sure.
minutes in. If you know there aren't as many, then I'll wait till about 45. And then every time I do that, I scare the people who are talking. So I apologize in advance. So I said, let me just like pop up. And then we'll just get through the questions. We'll get through as many of them as we can. And then we will move on from there. So let me see. I just want to make sure I have all my stuff in a row. All right. I am ready if you guys are.
Ready?
Let's
Ready.
do it.
So the only awkward part is during my, because I have everybody pinned, like, although you can turn your camera off if you want. While I'm doing the intro, we are all kind of on screen, which I know is kind of strange. So I'm just letting you know that you are going to be on screen in 2 seconds when I hit this button. All right. Admitting them all. All right. We've got so many people jumping in. I'm seeing. I'm giving everybody a second to connect before I get going on my spiel so that nobody has to sit through it twice. Let's see, we've still got 1 or 2 joining. Looks like the majority of you have connected. A couple more popping in. Hi, everybody. Good night or good evening, I should say. As you are logging in tonight, your cameras and your microphones are off, and we're asking you if they could remain off because it actually really helps us just crack down on that terrible Zoom lag that we have all come to hate so much. And that way I won't be like all pixelated, like, and while I'm trying to talk for you. It's just one of those things that keeps Zoom running a little bit smoother. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody's in and connected. Hi, everybody. I am Carrie. I'm from the Andersons events team. I just want to take a moment to welcome you to our adoption roundtable tonight with Gabrielle Glaser, Jeff Hoffmann, Julie McGue, and Lisa Wingate, moderated tonight for us by Susanna Porter. Thank you all for being here. Oops, let me let in a couple more. Thank you all for being here tonight. The Anderson family, believe it or not, has been selling books independently since 1875. And we've never quite faced what we've been through the last couple of years. That's true, but we've made it through really hard times before, including the last pandemic, believe it or not. And we're going to make it through this time too, but we just can't say enough how much your support of this event by attending tonight and your purchase of the book through us allows us to remain in business. And we're just really grateful for it. And we really mean that from the bottom of our book loving hearts. A couple things about tonight before we get started. As mentioned previously, your cameras and microphones are off. So if you could keep them off, that'd be great. But we will still have Q&A. So if you'd like to ask questions, just go ahead and put them through the chat at any time during the event. And I will be collecting them all. I'll pop back on at the end and I will ask them on your behalf. So ask away in the chat at any time during the event. The more I can collect, the better. The questions kind of make the event a lot more fun for all of us, including the authors. So ask away. Let's see. Oh, and if you ordered books for tonight, just know that you'll receive an email when your book is ready to be picked up, either at our store or once it has been shipped off to you, if you chose that option. And I just want to remind you guys that sometimes that kind of takes us a day or two after an event. And that's only because we have an actual human being who, packages up all those and rings up all those event books and gets them ready to go to you guys. If you have not ordered your book for tonight, don't fear. I will be putting links for how to order them in the chat. And remember, I believe everybody gave us book plates tonight, correct? So signed book plates. So don't forget, Mother's Day is coming. Signed books make an amazing gift. So stock up. Okay, with that, I'm going to disappear for a little bit and let you guys get to what you came for. And I'd first like to introduce Susanna Porter, who is with us tonight. She will be moderating tonight's discussion. She is the Vice President and Executive Editor at Ballantine Books. Hello, Susanna.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for coming. And I love the opportunity to talk with these four authors about these four different books that take very different views on adoption, which is such an interesting subject, especially for those of us who have had some personal connection with it, or even if one hasn't. I thought we're going to have each author talk about their own book and then ask some questions. But first, I thought it might be interesting just for each of the authors to just introduce themselves briefly and to say if they have a personal connection with adoption, as I imagine some of the audience here does too. So I'll just say, I was already introduced, so I'm Susanna Porter, Executive Editor at Random House and Ballantine. And my personal connection is that I have, my husband and I have two daughters adopted from China in 1996 and 2000. And so they are now both in their 20s and they're just great girls. And we're so blessed to have them as part of our family. We all live in New York. They're both still here. They haven't moved away anywhere. So that's my connection and why I'm particularly interested and passionate about this subject. Jeff, do you want to pick up from me?
Sure. My name's Jeff Hoffmann. I sometimes recognized as RJ Hoffman on front of books. I have a very personal connection with adoption. My daughter is 19, came home from China in 2003, and my son is 20, also came home from Nepal in 2003. So we went from 0 to 60 in about 4 months.
Gabrielle, would you like to go next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Glaser, and I do not have a personal connection with adoption other than having been the author of my most recent book.
Great. And Lisa, do you want to go next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Wingate and the author of Before We Were Yours. I don't have a lot of family connections with adoption. I had a few cousins who were adopted, and my brothers and I looked so much alike that it was woefully, painfully obvious all the time growing up that I was not adopted. Although many times I sort of wished I wasn't related to those two mean and evil older brothers, but I love them now, so it's okay. But my biggest connection to adoption is having written Before We Were Yours, and then the aftermath that came from that, of hearing from so many people who had been tied up in this adoption scandal in Tennessee that went on for about 3 decades. So my biggest connection is really having experienced the journeys of the adoptees who got in touch after the book.
Great, thank you. And Julie?
Well, I guess I'm the only adoptee on this panel. And I was adopted with my twin sister, and we were raised together. We have a younger brother that's also adopted from a different biological family. And then my parents went on and had 3 biological children of their own. So we were truly a blended family. And I'll talk about my story when we get to everybody's introductions.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so the plan was that we would ask each of these authors to give a summary of their book, describe it. And so Jeff, do you want to start? And then we'll go through that, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Sure, thank you. My book is named Other People's Children. And in that book, Gail and John Durbin moved to the suburbs as soon as Gail becomes pregnant. But after 3 miscarriages, they turn to adoption. And after several false starts, Carly Brennan, a pregnant teen, chooses them to adopt her child. And as soon as the Durbins bring their baby home, Maya, they instantly fall in love with her, and she begins to mend their fractured marriage. Before she gave birth, Carly knew that placing her baby with the Durbins was the right thing for her. She didn't think she was ready to raise a child and would give her a chance to escape her abusive home and allow her to pursue a college degree. But then her mom forces her to look at Maya's face in the recovery room, and then embarks upon a campaign to change Carly's mind. And meanwhile, Paige, the social worker, can't find Carly when it's time to sign the final consent. And when she finally surfaces 4 days later, Carly tells Paige that she wants to reclaim her child. But when Paige goes to the Durbins to collect the baby, she finds that the Durbins and Maya have disappeared without a trace.
Wow, that's a cliffhanger. Okay, and so that's a novel I should mention. And Gabrielle, the author of American Baby, which is nonfiction. Do you want to tell us next a little bit about your book?
Yes, of course. My book is, as you said, a nonfiction book that investigates something called the baby scoop era, which was the period in the immediate years after World War II and before Roe v. Wade, in which about an estimated 4 million babies were surrendered for adoption by unwed mothers. And they were surrendered into an adoption system that was quite lucrative and somewhat exploitative. And in order to tell that national tale, I tell the 2 stories of an adopted man named David Rosenberg and his lifelong search to find his birth mother, Margaret Earl Katz. And due to secrecy laws that existed throughout the country, as a result of child stealing, and we'll get to this later, Lisa, as a result of a child stealing ring that began in the 1920s, these 2, mother and son, were unable to find each other despite decades of searching. And the story tells the book tells the story of their lives and of their bittersweet reunion 3 months before David Rosenberg died of the very diseases about which his mother had tried to warn him his entire life. And due to these secrecy laws, the adoption agency had never passed on those messages.
Wow, gosh. Julie, also a nonfiction book, Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging. Do you want to tell us a little about your book?
Sure. My book is actually a memoir, and the book starts at 48. I'm 48 years old, and I am sent for a breast biopsy, and I come home from that procedure, and my husband says, it's time for you to try and find information about your past. And so the first thing I have to do is talk to my twin sister and get her to agree that this is the right time for us to start this process. And then I have to talk to my adoptive parents because they still have my adoption papers in order to get started. And so my sister and I were the searchers together. I wrote the story. I did most of the work because she had a full-time job. And we ended up using multiple, what we call search angels. So I used an adoption agency, a search agency. I used a private investigator at one point, a confidential intermediary, and a genealogist. And it took us 5 years to get both sides of our family medical history and our personal background. But in the process, we had a lot of issues to deal with. My adoptive mother was not happy that I was doing this, even though I was a middle-aged woman. We ran into a conflict trying to find our birth mother. But at the end of the story, without giving anything away, everything comes full circle, and an astounding discovery happens at the end of the book.
Wow, sounds wonderful. And Lisa, do you want to tell us about your novel a little bit?
Sure. Before We Were Yours is fiction, of course, based on the kind of the child stealing scandal that changed adoption laws beginning in the mid-20s through 1950. This woman, Georgia Tan, became known as the mother of modern adoption. She really takes adoption from a practice that it was very rare prior to her era for people to adopt a child as their son or daughter and their heir to their fortune. People sometimes took in kids just to raise them or, take care of them. It was very rare to think of an adopted child, an orphan, as becoming your own son or daughter. And really, Georgia Tan comes onto the scene in the mid-20s, and she begins adopting children out to sort of made-to-order children out to the wealthy and the famous and Hollywood celebrities. And she publicizes this very well. And she gives adoption kind of a whole new shiny look to everybody. These kids are marketed. People used to get together and have little Tupperware parties but it was baby brochures. And groups of people would get together, and one of them would be an adoptive parent, and they would sell the idea to other people who hope to adopt. And so she had a very lucrative for-profit adoption business going on for these 3 decades. The dirty little secret of that was that some of the children were orphans who were given up by parents who could not raise them. But many of them were just stolen from single mothers, from impoverished families, from off the street. The whole batches of siblings disappeared walking home from school. She had a network of spotters, and she developed this nationwide ring of shipping children all across the nation to adoptive parents. And that is the basis, the historical basis of the story of Before We Were Yours, which is about 5 little river rat kids growing up on a shanty boat in the Mississippi River. And what happens when their mother, Queenie, is about to give birth to the next child in the family, and they just happen to be drifting past Memphis, and they're forced to dock and seek professional help in Memphis because it's a difficult birth. And that is where, as was the case in real life with so many families, they just crossed the path of Georgia Tan's network completely randomly, and their futures were altered forever because the kids disappeared. It was really very often just wrong place, wrong time. And so that's the story, the historical basis and the story behind the fictional Foss family in the book.
Great. Great summary. Thank you. Thank you all. So now I'm going to circle back to Jeff and then to each of you and ask just a few questions. And feel free, you other authors, to chime in or to ask to clarify or make a comparison with your own book or something, if you like. Jeff, I was just wondering, as an adoptive parent, like I am, how was your experience as an adoptive parent? How did it inform your writing? Did it actually motivate you to write this book, or was it an underlying feeling throughout? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think you write what you know, and this isn't, we adopted internationally, as I mentioned earlier, so this wasn't our story, right? But so much of what the adoptive couple anyway goes through, it has some roots in our own personal story, right? So much about adoption is waiting and anxiety and uncertainty, and it's one of the most consequential events of your life, becoming a parent, and you have so little control over it. And we weren't spared any of that. And, some of the anxiety and anticipation found its way into Gail and John's experience as well. And I think the other thing that, I always come back to is that when you adopt a child, I learned that you don't kind of fall in love with an adopted child gradually. At least I didn't. When my daughter and son were each, placed into my arms, I fell head over and heels in love with them. And that same kind of love swamped the Durbins in my novel. And Gail described it as like a car crash or waking from a deep sleep into a bright light. And, Maya made them a family. And then when Carly reclaimed Maya, even though Maya had only been home for just a few days, they couldn't imagine their lives without her. And that drove them to act desperately.
Yeah, I'll just chime in to say that when we saw the picture of our daughters from China, that you get several months at least before you get to go travel, you fall in love with this picture. It's all you have, and then you're just waiting, like, I want to go and get her. She's over there and we're over here, and it's driving me crazy. So the anxiety is definitely a big part of it, no matter what your journey is. So along these same lines, you wrote your novel from multiple perspectives, from the point of view of both the adopting parents and of the birth mother. And can you tell us why you did that? It's so interesting, but what was your thinking?
I didn't want to write a story of villains and heroes, is part of it. I wanted the reader to root for both sides in this scenario, right? At various points in the book, and I think I wanted them to decide where they wanted the baby to end up towards the end of the book. And I made the story stronger, made it more taut, and it built the suspense and the emotional stakes. But I think it also forced me to round out the characters and give them all warts and give them all the things that you love about them. And more to the point of today's discussion, I think it matches my view of adoption, where there are no villains and there are no heroes, right? There's people struggling with difficult circumstances and decisions, and there are people trying to build families. I hope that slipping in and out of the subjectivity of each of these characters, brings those different perspectives home.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, as I understand it, that unfortunately I haven't read the whole novel, but that readers empathize with both sides, with both parties, which is great, because as you say, there's no hero, no villains. Yeah,
that was certainly the goal.
Well done. So the law, you were saying, is when we talked before, has swung in the right direction, and that there are more rights now for the birth mother. And how do you think? And there's more choice in terms of open adoption and that sort of thing. How do you think that this change has affected the process? Do you think it's made it better? Do you think it's made it more complicated for both sides? How do you view it?
Well, I just want to be clear that at the outset, that the law has swung in the right direction, right? The birth parents are now afforded more rights and more choices, and the adoptees benefit from both open adoptions and the transparency that Julie yearned for. All that said, the path to domestic adoption can be fraught for the adoptive families. I think that, between 3 and 5% of adoptions end in reclamation. And there's lots of fits and starts and lots of expectations that get shattered. And I don't say that to say that, I love the fact that I built my family through adoption, but you have to decide whether you're emotionally equipped to work through everything that a domestic adoption might throw at you. And when people ask why we were adopting from China and Nepal, and as we were going through the process, I sometimes said that we weren't ready for that. And as a couple, that we weren't ready for that emotional toll. Of course, now I just say that I adopted from China because my daughter was there, and I adopted from Nepal because my son was in Nepal.
Right, that's nice. And finally, one last question. You were talking about what's best for the baby. And in fact, everybody says it's what's best for the baby. And we don't really know what's best for the baby. A life in a more privileged household isn't necessarily going to make a happier life for this baby. Did you have any particular thoughts about what's best for the baby when you were writing your novel?
Yeah, I think I went into writing the novel with strong feelings, and I think the novel's kind of a product of that. When in the beginning I had friends or family that told me what a great opportunity we were giving our children, and I always pushed back against that. I just don't subscribe to the idea that we were, quote unquote, saving our children from a more difficult life. I wish that no child ever had to go through the trauma of being separated from their birth parents, because that trauma is real and it's difficult. And, I have no reason to believe that my children are better off with my wife and I than they would have been with their birth parents if their birth parents were in a position to raise them. Right. And, I choose to think that we've been entrusted with the task of raising a child born to someone else. And I consider that an honor and a responsibility, right? And that's the way I think about it. And I think that that's the attitude that I brought into the book. Not all the characters feel the same way because the writer isn't the character, right? But it explores all sides of the book. Explores all sides of how people how people on each end of the adoption feel and process their expectations.
Great, thank you. So I'll switch to Gabrielle. So I'm curious how you found your nonfiction book, again, how you found the story of your subject, Margaret Erie, you tell me how to pronounce it, and her son. How did you come upon their story?
I was a newspaper reporter in Portland, Oregon in the early 2000s, and I wrote a story about David Rosenberg, who was, as I said, an adopted guy. He was getting a kidney because he was adopted. He needed a kidney, and he was getting one from a fellow congregant. He was a cantor at a large synagogue. And when I went to meet him for the first time, I was doing a story about the Jewish holidays and the meaning of sharing and healing the world. The first thing that David told me in a dialysis center was that he hoped that the story would go viral and that his birth mother would see the story and recognize him as her son. And he had been led to believe that he had been given up, that he was an inconvenience to his birth parents, and that there was really not much more to the story other than that he had been unwanted. And because of secrecy laws put in place indirectly by Lisa's antagonist, Georgia Tan in New York State, David was unable to actually access his original birth certificate. And we can get to that in a second. But 7 years later, when he was very ill, he got the results of a DNA test, which ultimately led him to a distant cousin who I'm sure Julie can connect to this in some ways, who was an amateur genealogist who was able to put together the dots of what was called David's, I'm blanking, his non-identifying information that was left for him at the adoption agency. She was this distant cousin who he had, complete stranger, fourth cousin, who he had met through a DNA test, was able to piece together tiny little bits of information that David had been given. She put those together. She used a series of clues and multiple strokes of luck to be able to locate Margaret Earl. That's how you pronounce her name, Margaret Earl, on through social media. And within 3 weeks' time, mother and son were able to meet. And David called me. I'd become his friend by 2014 when he got the results of this test. David called me to tell me that the complete storyline that he had integrated into his being, his entire life, was wrong. In fact, Margaret Earl had done everything she could have as a teenage girl in New York City in 1961 to try to maintain custody of her son. She was forbidden to do so, not only by her parents and by culture, the culture of the time, which was extremely conservative, and a period in which the sexual revolution was simmering. There was no sex education, virtually no birth control, even for married couples. And of course, abortion was illegal. There was incredible pressure on young women to surrender their children if they became pregnant out of wedlock. And in fact, New York state law demanded that girls do so. Premarital sex was actually a crime in New York state until 1971. So despite the fact that Margaret and her boyfriend, George Katz, who loved each other very much, got married, went on to raise 3 more children, did everything they could to keep their son, they were prevented by New York state law in the year 1962. So David learned the truth of his origin story, as I said earlier, very shortly before his death. And it altered how he saw himself in the world. And he was able to leave this earth feeling very differently about how he came into it, which was with love, teenagers in love.
How dramatic. And were these draconian laws, did they, and this is a question for you and Lisa, did they come about as a backlash to Georgia Tann's abuses, or were there tough adoption laws before that, before her 1920s?
No, in fact, the first secrecy law came into play here in California. I'm in Los Angeles right now. It was passed in 1935, directly as a result of Georgia Tann's actions, because she was, as Lisa had said earlier, there was a pipeline between Memphis straight to Los Angeles and secondarily to New York City, where prominent people in show business, Joan Crawford was one of her primary clients in Los Angeles. That it's not exactly proven, but the governor, there's some evidence to believe that the governor of the state of New York, Herbert Lehman, who was the adoptive father of 3 children, that he had obtained one of his children from Georgia Tann. So in 1935, secrecy laws were established first in California, secondarily in New York, and they worked like this. When a child was surrendered for adoption, or in the case of 5,000 adoptees who Georgia Tann took, in some cases, as Lisa said, stole, when a child was surrendered, the child's original birth certificate was closed, was sealed to all but state officials. A second amended birth certificate was then issued in its stead, listing the child's adoptive name as his original name and the names of the adoptive parents as if they were the original parents. And the logic behind that, the expert version of the logic of that at the time was the following. Number one, it would protect children from the taint of illegitimacy. Number two, it would shield unwed mothers from the shame of the stigma of their having gotten pregnant out of wedlock. But it also helped reassure adoptive parents that no birth parents would come to try to interfere with the newly created family. Most importantly, however, and overarchingly, that series of laws first passed in those 2 states and eventually adopted in 46 others, every state but Alaska and Kansas, was to cover the tracks of initially Georgia Tann and ultimately other copycat baby thieves like her. So that's a long way to answer that question, but that's
No,
how we got
it's-
to those secrecy laws.
That's amazing. And the status of those laws today, some of them have been taken back, some not, is that right?
Jeff mentioned something earlier about laws changing. Laws have only changed in 10 states. Open adoption is the norm now for domestic adoption, but it doesn't mean that the laws regarding birth certificates have changed. Those have only changed, giving adoptees absolutely full open access in 10 states. California, Texas, Florida, even Maryland, Minnesota, many large states.
Illinois.
And Illinois still have absolutely on lockdown the original birth certificates of millions of adoptees in this country.
Wow. Is there any hope of changing that? Is there some lobbying to try to change that, you know?
There's a lot of lobbying. New York State opened up with the tireless efforts of 40 years of adoptee rights activists, opened up its records in 2019. Actually, the law came into effect in 2020. Connecticut just opened its records for adoptees. Louisiana, shockingly, yesterday, the conservative state of Louisiana passed a bill in the House to allow adoptees open access there. It's extremely, there seems to be no rhyme nor reason. The cobalt blue state of Oregon was the first to open its records in the year 2000, followed very quickly by Vermilion, Alabama. So there's not a lot of reason to why why lawmakers get convinced in one state and they don't in another.
No.
But it's ongoing.
Yeah, maybe it's that some of them have direct experience with adoption and so understand it, and some of them are just completely oblivious to all this.
Susanna, some of that is actually following scandals that when the adoption laws, like Louisiana, when Before We Were Yours came out, so that's 2017. The Catholic Charities from Louisiana contacted me because the domicile laws in the state were loose, which meant you could move a woman in there and she lived there for a month. You call her domiciled in the state, you could adopt the baby out in Louisiana. So when that's possible, high-priced lawyers come in and it becomes a hub for these kind of adoptions. And that was the problem in Louisiana. And then once birth mothers learn that, they can get their medical expenses made, they become solicited by these lawyers. And pretty soon people like the Catholic Charities, who are legit, but those are not big money adoptions. They're not getting any babies. So people who don't have big money to spend on a private lawyer adoption have less and less chance of getting a baby. And so that they were working hard at that time. In fact, I did some things with them, and they were working hard at that time in Louisiana to clean up the domicile laws. In Arizona, a few years ago, there was a state politician who ended up in prison because of running a similar thing, bringing women in from, I think, the Marshall Islands, and basically housing them in the state in houses, and they weren't even always aware that their babies were going to be taken away. So a lot of times the change in laws follows some kind of a scandal that that brings it to the forefront.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Really interesting. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Julie now to talk about Twice a Daughter.
Okay. Did you want to ask a question for Susanna?
Yes, please. Yeah. You're amazing that, at age 48, you began this process. And I was just curious. I remember reading that you had or hearing that you had a biopsy or illness. And was it, and then your husband also spoke to you about it. Had it crossed your mind? Had this been something that was boiling up inside of you before that? Or did it just spring forth, at this age of 48?
Well, I think most adoptees will admit that they have fantasies when they're growing up, and curiosities, especially if you're from closed adoption like myself and my twin sister. But you've got this balancing act. You have this loyalty to your adoptive parents who you care about deeply, and you have a good life. And so to jeopardize that in any way, you don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know what's you're going to find on the other side of your search. So there's a lot of complacency. There's a term in the adoption world called coming out of the fog. And in a sense, that's what happened to me at 48. I decided I was going to go on this path, give my children, I have 4 children, give them a sense of their medical background and their family history. And so I essentially did it for them, but I did it for myself too. And I did jeopardize my relationship with my adoptive mom. She wasn't happy. I had this health issue going on, not sure if I was going to have breast cancer or not. I've got this conflict with my mother, and I run into a lot of problems getting access to information, going right back to what Lisa and Gabrielle were talking about. Illinois was just opening their records. It didn't end up benefiting me because I did find my birth mother before I got my original birth record. But I had to go through this whole rigmarole with Catholic Charities. I got my non-identified information from the file and had people looking for her. Unfortunately, which was often the case back in the 1950s and 60s, birth mothers were allowed to use an alias on their our birth certificates. So when I did locate her, the name that she had used was fictitious. It was completely legal. It's on my original birth record. And what was also legal is birth fathers were not given the chance to give away their rights. You could adopt a baby with just the birth mother's permission. So my original birth certificate has where my birth father's name should be. It says legally omitted. So there's a lot of changes in law that happened as a course of, many changes in state history.
Wow. And what about your sister? So this moment came to you, and you're obviously encouraged by your husband. And what did she have to say?
Well, I see her name on the screen here. So she
okay. Well, you better be polite.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I'm a little different than most adoptees in the sense that I grew up with my identical twin sister. Yeah. And parents of twins, we've had fun conversations about this. In life, it's a passenger driver situation. There have been things that my sister has convinced me to do that wasn't my idea. But I went along with it because I trust her, and sure, let's go down the road. And this was one of those things where it was my idea brought on by my husband's insistence. And I'm not sure if the breast biopsy, if it hadn't happened, we would have gone down this path. But given how it has turned out, we're both tremendously happy that it did. It healed a rift in my adoptive family because of the way the story turns out. We find some relatives that are literally right next door. And I think it healed something in us too, that search for who are we? Where did we come from? Are we Irish or not? Because that's what we've been told we were. Turns out that we have Native American in us, which no way I would have suspected that whatsoever. So a lot of wonderful pieces of information came out from this work. What I'd like to say is important to me from having written the book is the conversations that it has opened up. I did not always talk to my mom about my adoption or how I was thinking about it. And it was a forced conversation because of this search. And now she comes to my author events. She's one of my biggest fans. We had such a wonderful growing arc to our relationship because of this struggle that we went through together. And, you know, I think the conversation between adoptees, adoptive parents, and birth mothers, because I've been through a lot of support group therapy with Catholic Charities, the conversation that we can all learn from talking to one another is helpful to everybody. We have unique perspectives, much like some of the stories that were shared earlier. I had no idea why my birth mom gave us up. Turns out she was an unwed mother. There was a difference in religion between my birth father and my birth mother, and that got in the way of their staying together. So many fascinating things that it's important to share. Given that open adoptions are more prevalent, there's no understanding of what the closed adoption adoptee goes through.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's fascinating. And I know we want to have to save time for the Q&A, so I want to circle over to Lisa. And I have to say that I'm admit the happy truth that I'm Lisa's editor, so I know this book very well. So, but I would love to know, tell everybody, because it's so interesting, how you came upon the subject of Georgia Tann.
Oh, completely by accident. Every book for me is sparked by something, and I never know when the spark is coming. And I was literally up late one night, pulling an all-nighter on deadline for another book, and I looked up I turned the sound off on the TV but left it playing, and because you know, when even the dog gives up on you and goes to bed, it's just lonely. So I had the TV and I looked up Unsolved Mystery, not Unsolved Mysteries, Discovery Channel's Deadly Women was on, and it was an episode, you know, you could tell it was the 1940s. It's this big mansion and the front room is full of babies, and I thought, what is this about? So I turned it on and I took in the story of this woman and the Tennessee Children's Home Society in Memphis, and how she formed this giant black market baby ring with spotters all over the city and in other cities, and control of the welfare services, and the ability to go into all the orphanages and pick up kids, and go into hospitals and take babies out of maternity wards and tell their mothers they had died in birth. And you know, and I just thought, how does someone get away with this? You know, like, why didn't people just go, if their kid was taken, why didn't they just go get their kid back out of the orphanage and say, no, that's my kid? You know, I just couldn't imagine, if it was true, how it could be true. Hundreds of kids perished in her care because the boarding homes were unregulated, unsupervised, all for profit. They didn't give proper medical care. You know, and so I just dug into it and I thought, how do I not know this? You know, I've lived near Memphis, I've book toured in Memphis. How have I never heard of this? Thousands and thousands of kids, tens of thousands of families, when you connect birth families, adoptive families, several generations down the road. And so, you know, when you write fiction, then you start thinking, whose eyes would you look at this story through? And that's how the story was born.
Yeah. Great. I love that. Love that story, how you came upon it. And last question, and then we'll move to Q&A. I just, it's such an interesting story how in the light of this book, how so many adoptees discovered Georgia Tann, who, like you, hadn't known anything about her, and realized when they pieced together their past that they may well have been Georgia Tann adoptees, and that they, through your book, learned about the existence of her and the orphanage and so forth. Just tell us a little bit about how they contacted you, and how what resulted in your book that just grew out of that.
Yeah, I never anticipated that, you know, because it's been decades ago, and I didn't expect to start hearing from the real life people whose lives had been altered by the Tennessee Children's Home Society and Georgia Tann. And about, I wasn't even through the first book tour, the first 6 or 8 weeks, people started showing up at the book events with these crates or notebooks or pull crates full of materials that we now kind of casually call their adoptee Bibles, but it was their you know, all their information from their searches and their fake birth certificate and their real birth certificate. And sometimes family reunion photos or photos they had obtained once they found their family members, or some of them hadn't found them yet. And, you know, and sometimes it was the next generation, a child of an adoptee or a grandchild of a Tennessee Children's Home Society adoptee. And some of them wanted, you know, more help. Some of them wanted to know if I, you know, had any resources to offer them. Some of them just wanted to tell their stories. And then they started emailing me once I got home. I was getting the same things by email attachments. And they started kind of asking a common question, you know, would you ever get us all together? Would you ever have a reunion for us? There was no clearinghouse for these people to meet each other. And they were curious how the other Tennessee Children's Home Society adoptees, how their lives went. How did they feel about it? How did it turn out for them? What were their circumstances? And so we jumped in and did it a couple of years ago, and just kind of put the word out to all the people I had heard from, said, you know, I'm going to be in Memphis for an event at the cemetery that houses the only children Georgia Tann ever admitted died in her care, which is 19 children, hundreds disappeared in her care. But the ones they admitted to are buried in this cemetery in Memphis, and I was going to do a fundraiser speech for them. So we incorporated a reunion and invited them to come. We'd all stay at the same hotel. We didn't know if anyone would show up. A reporter friend of mine, Judy Christie, came to take down their stories. And the result was this book, Before and After, which is kind of a nonfiction sequel to a fiction book, but it's the true stories of all these people who showed up for the reunion and how their families got wrapped, you know, how the Tennessee Children's Home Society and Georgia Tann came across their families, how it altered their lives, how they felt about it. It's just their stories and the story of that reunion of these people. So this was a completely unexpected experience, but it's been wonderful.
All right. Oh, that's great. That's a great story. It's a wonderful book too. Okay. Well, I think we now have Q&A time.
Yeah.
So we'll turn it back over to Carrie.
Hi guys, I'm back. Okay, yeah, we have a few questions that have come through the chat. I just wanted to thank everybody for submitting them. And then also we've had quite a discussion going on in the chat too that I learned a lot from actually. I am excited to get going. I just want to let everyone know we've got about 10 minutes left, so we might not get through everything. So I just wanted to make sure nobody feels slighted if I don't get to their question. We'll get through as many as we can. Let's see. Let's start with this one for Jeff. Jeff, when your children read your novel, what do you think they will get from it?
What an interesting question. They haven't read it yet. You know, my son's 20 and my daughter's 19, so they have their own lives to worry about, I guess, right? And I think they'll, you know, I think they process their own adoption in different ways, right, all the time. And I think that, you know, in the book, the baby is 3 weeks old, and at the end of other people's children. So the thoughts and the realities of the baby aren't explored, right? The child isn't much of a character at 3 weeks old, and so I don't know as adoptees that they'll get much out of it, but I think they you know, may process some of their own feelings about adoption that they've been working through over the last, you know, 15 or 20 years, and that's what I hope, that they you know, find ways to filter their emotions through the story and the stories, other stories and other books that feature adoption as a centerpiece.
All right, thanks. This is one about like older children adoptions, and this was one that kind of goes out to all of you. This attendee shares, I was a ward of the state who aged out. My younger sister was adopted. My older sister was unofficially adopted, not legally adopted, but brought in by another family. Do you have any knowledge or perspective of adoptions from foster care or older children? And do you have any recommendations for books on that, or different perspectives or points of view about that?
I can only offer one comment, maybe. The Midwest Adoption Center, which is one of the agencies that I used to help me find my birth relatives, they also do searches for children or adults that were in foster care, either helping them find families that they were placed with, or some of their own siblings. I don't know of any books that deal with that, whether fiction or nonfiction. I just know that that is something that people do study, and it's a very helpful situation to be able to find people that you lived with at one point.
Right. Anybody else have anything else to, any other books?
There are some great resources on, I'm not sure for that specifically, but I definitely check on G's adoption website. G apostrophe G's adoption. It's G like the letter. They worked on getting the Missouri records opened and whatnot, and there are some great resources on there. I mean, as with anything on the internet, you need to be careful. You don't, with your private information, but I refer people there a lot for resources. So I'd at least check.
All right. Somebody in the chat just said you can go to Twitter and search for Adoptee Twitter. There are adoptees on there that have lived experiences and provide very good info. So that's always great to hear. Lots of great sharing going on in the chat about resources and processes to find some of that buried information that's being really sort of criminally kept from people who have, questions about their own history. So lots of good information in the chats on that. This is a question for Julie. Julie, you mentioned your adoptive mother. You talked a little bit about this, not necessarily supporting your journey to find your biological family. Can you speak a little bit about that process? And do you have any advice for others who are maybe managing that same tension on their journey to find a biological relative?
Well, we didn't really have the tools, she and I, to work through that initially. I was adopted through Catholic Charities, and fortunately for me, they have a post-adoption support group. And there's adoptive parents, birth parents, and adoptees in the same room. And we spent a lot of time hammering out our feelings and disappointments and what have you. I never did bring my adoptive mom to that meeting, but the benefit to me was I understood her better from having been part of that group, because I understood that she was afraid that she was going to lose my sister and I in some way. And so I became more sensitive towards her. And I think that allowed us to have a better dialogue about it going forward. And we have a good dialogue. In fact, I was saying to somebody the other day, I took her to lunch and we had soup at Panera, and out of the blue she said, "How's your birth mother?" Now, that's not a conversation that I would have had with her 10 years ago, but that is where we have come from and where we've gotten to. And I really appreciate that. My journey was tough on both of us, but we have come to where we need to be. And she's my mom, and we have much better relationship than we ever did before.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. Sometimes maybe then you just kind of have to get through that awkward spot, and it's a lot of change. I can understand why it's really scary from both sides. Let's see, we've got a bunch left, but probably time for one or two more. Let's see. Here's just a basic, very kind of just a question about being an author, and for all of you, to all the authors, how did you find your agent and publisher, and how did you find that journey? Anyone want to go first?
Oh gosh. So I've had a few agents and publishers. Before We Were Yours was book number 30 for me. I'm kind of a dinosaur. I started back in the days when you printed your manuscript and you put it in, you bought these nice little white boxes. Susanna probably remembers, and you sent your
do.
full manuscript out in this white box, and then you waited for months hoping to hear from an editor or an agent. And yeah, so it has changed a lot over the years, but I had changed agents right before we were yours. So that was a fun and different experience because the book went to auction, and I talked to a lot of different publishers, and then I landed with amazing Valentine and Susanna, and so it's so different now because everything's done by email and whatnot. But one of the best things you can do for yourself if you are an author looking is get involved in some writers conferences, writers groups. You can often go talk personally to editors and agents at writers conferences and whatnot. And you can check agents and editors, and not everything's through agents, but you can check agents' websites for how to submit, and then just go for it. You don't really have anything to lose.
That's true. Nothing to lose.
Right.
Also,
Anybody else?
yes, also I would suggest that anybody looking to publish a book, and maybe it's their first book, to look at Publishers Lunch and see what has recently sold that might be in line with your subject matter. Also look at books that might be similar to what some sort of similar subject matter that might be along the lines of yours, and look and see who those agents are, and query those folks.
Yeah, it's a great place to look in the acknowledgement section of
Exactly.
books. It's
Yeah,
they
right.
thank their agent, and you think,
Mhm.
oh, that's similar to what I'm doing. Yeah.
I think the good news from my story is that I didn't know anybody in New York or that many writers when I started querying, and I did it the old-fashioned way, and I found Publishers Marketplace and Query Tracker as great tools to see who was reading and who was selling books, and then sent the query letter off to a bunch of agents, and found the ones that were interested, and found the one that was willing to work with me to make it into something that was sellable.
Okay, well, we are almost out of time. So I'm actually going to end with one of my favorite questions at every event, which is just for those in the publishing industry and those of us lucky enough to work in bookstores, we often get sneak peeks at books and things that are coming up or are going to be released soon. And it's definitely a massive job perk. And I was just wondering if any of you have read anything recently that might be coming out soon, or even if it just recently came out that you really like and that you're excited about, or that you want to recommend. It does not have to be about adoption.
Well, I just finished reading Billie Jean King's autobiography, All In, and for anybody that grew up barely playing women's sports, she was the #1 advocate for Title IX and equal pay for women in sports. And I can't say enough about the book. It was really, really fun to read.
Wonderful.
I just read Jonathan Franzen's Crossroads, which was one of his best, and I'm really excited about the next two that will come as part of that trilogy.
All right, love it. Franzen's always great.
3. So Lisa Scottolini, What Happened to the Bennetts?
Yes.
Really good. Adriana Trigiani's has The Good Left Undone, which I loved. It's not out quite yet, but it's worth waiting for. And a debut book called The Tobacco Wives, about the scandal of big tobacco, and back when they were saying cigarettes were healthy to calm housewives' nerves down and things. Pretty fascinating.
I saw that on the ARC shelf yesterday, actually. Maybe I'll
Yeah, a good read.
Anyone else? Anything you read recently that you want to recommend?
I'll recommend one of my authors, Paula
Please
McLean, who wrote The Paris Wife, which a lot of people have read. And her new book is suspense, called When the Stars Go Dark, set in California in 1993. Fabulous book, just out in paperback.
Okay.
So I'm reading something that I couldn't describe as fun, but it is incredibly instructive, and it is from the Nobel Prize winning laureate Svetlana Alexievich, and it's called The Unwomanly Art of War. And it is oral histories of women who fought for the Soviet army during World War II. And it is an absolutely riveting, it's very, very difficult going, but it is a riveting read and will bring you right to the news today.
Oh yeah, timely. Isn't it funny
Yeah,
how
very
sometimes you
much.
read these
Yeah.
historical books and they're eerily timely. Well, I'm going to share that I just read something really exciting that comes out in May. It's called Remarkably Bright Creatures. And actually it's from an author. She is a debut, Shelby Van Pelt. And it is going to come out in May, like I said, so I highly recommend it. I don't want to spoil too much. It's sort of on point with tonight's topics. There isn't an adoption storyline, but there is a family, a couple generations of a family that have been separated based on some things that happened and that find each other again. And a good quarter of it is told from the perspective of an octopus who's very grumpy and is living in an aquarium watching all of them. And he figures out first that they're related and he's trying to like help them figure it out. And it's just a fantastic read, and it comes out right in time for Mother's Day, and it's a great, and like I said, debut, and she's from the Chicago area. So of course I'm going to like talk it up and love it. So that's all from me. Let's see. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all your questions tonight. Like I said, the chat, wow, is just still going. So many amazing points in there, so many amazing resources, lots of opinions and feelings as well, which is, I would imagine, very standard. I know that this is a topic that can get very sensitive. So I really thank all of you for being here tonight, you authors, and sharing your stories, all amazing books and very well written and really thought provoking. So thank you for sharing your books with us and your time with us tonight. And then of course I want to share or say thank you to everybody in the audience tonight and for your just continued support of Anderson's events by being here. And again, the links to purchase the books were in the chat. They will get sent out again via email. And we just encourage you to support all these authors who are here tonight by purchasing their books because they're all fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Carrie.
you so
Pleasure.
much. Thank you so
Good night,
much.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.